All right, we are 1 minute past the hour, so I guess I'm going to get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Heiko Hotz. I'm an AI ML solutions architect. I work at AWS, and today I want to show you how state-of-the-art NLP models can help with automating contract reviews. Before we get into the actual topic, just a quick note that this is the first session we have from this meetup group called NLP London. And the objectives of this meetup group are really to connect NLP practitioners with organizations who want to leverage NLP, want to show what is currently possible with NLP, and maybe also share some NLP success and failure stories. The idea really came up for me because I work a lot with customers who are interested in NLP, but are not quite familiar, not up to date, because it's not their main job to keep up to date with the recent progress in NLP. And as you guys probably all know, a lot has been happening in the space of NLP over the last 3 to 5 years. So there, I find when I talk to these organizations, there's always a bit of a mismatch. You know, on the one hand, you have all these new models and deep learning architectures coming out. But on the other hand, businesses just barely started to scratch the surface of what is possible with natural language processing. That's where I want to fill this gap by developing demos like today's demo, or share some stories, success or failure stories, where we all can learn from, like how natural language processing can be leveraged by organizations. Right, with that out of the way, a quick overview. I don't have many slides, I promise. I'm not much of a slides person myself, but I thought a quick overview on contract reviews might be beneficial, because maybe not everyone is familiar with that term. So what are contract reviews? Well, you can say that contract reviews, well, one definition is it's the process of thoroughly reading a contract to understand the rights and obligations of an individual or company signing it and assess the associated impact. That's a bit a mouthful, but basically you read through a contract and you try to extract some key information. You all probably know that from your personal lives, reading through house insurance or bike insurance, and just you know, figuring out the key points in that contract. Now, some of the challenges are, it's obviously time consuming, and so much so actually that lawyers spend approximately 50% of their time reviewing contracts. It's expensive because at least with large organizations, you need experienced, specialized training to read and understand the clauses in a contract. And large law firms, at least in the US, they usually charge around $500 to $900 per hour for contract review. And as a consequence, some small companies or organizations just cannot afford spending that much money, and often sign contracts without reading them, and that, you know, can have some catastrophic results. Now, when we think of contract reviews, we are obviously thinking about, you know, the law firm's legal sector. And it's certainly true for the legal sector, but really any sector that deals with contracts, enterprises, public sector, and so on, they are posed with the same challenges. Now, how can natural language processing then support with these contract reviews? Well, the idea is really simple. Well, simple enough. You know, whatever a human does in this scenario of contract reviewing, we want a machine learning model and natural language processing model to do the same. So we want the model to read through the contract and identify key information from those contracts. These models there are already natural language processing models out there that specialize in question answering or reading comprehension. So that means there are models out there that already are trained on reading a paragraph and answering questions about these paragraphs. But they required annotated, labeled training data to learn where in the paragraphs they have to look for to find that information. And one of these Q&A models, and I'm gonna try to switch between my presentation and, it's probably a bad idea, but between my presentation and the browser. So I hope you all can now see a website called CUAD. And CUAD is the Stanford Question Answering Dataset. And it is a reading comprehension dataset. So what that means is exactly what I said just now. There are models within this website. We can take, for example, the famous BERT model, and we can click on here. And by the way, all the links and resources that I'm going to share after the meeting on the Meetup website of our Meetup group. We can take a section, for example, European Union law, and you will see here on the left a paragraph. On the right, you will see certain questions about this paragraph, and the website provides the ground truth answers. Now, the ground truth answers are the answers that were deemed the correct answer by a human labeler. So a person read through the paragraph, and they said that these are the ground truth answers. This is what the model should try to predict. And every time it's green here on the side, that means the prediction by the model was correct. There must be some green. Okay, there's some red ones where the model predicted the wrong section in the paragraph as the answer. So in this case, the ground truth answer was the Faroe Islands, but the model predicted this particular text in the paragraph. But in general, these models perform really well, so well that in fact, some of these models tend to outperform humans. You can see here on the right-hand side the model performance compared to the human performance on top. And then further down below, you have all these different models, which at least, with these metrics here, outperform humans on the task of reading comprehension, reading a paragraph and trying to answer certain questions about it. So going back to the presentation. Now we have these models available. They're freely available on a website called Hugging Face. Hugging Face is a startup that specializes, started out by specializing in natural language processing models. And they are basically, you can think of it almost as a marketplace where people can upload their models for free and consumers can download those models also for free. It's all open source. And what you can do here is you can download a question answering model. So a question answering model like the ones we've just seen on that website, you can just download that. But then contracts are a specialized domain. So what you then need to do once you have this general question answering model is something called transfer learning. Now, transfer learning is very similar to how humans learn things. So let's say humans, for example, they learn they learn the English language, for example, as a whole. Before then, they transfer their skills to either reading a book or writing a novel. But both of these skills relate to, their language knowledge. It's not like you learn how to write a book from scratch and then discard all that knowledge because now you want to read a book, so you start from scratch. That's not what's happening with humans, and that's the idea behind transfer learning. We want basically to do the same with machine learning models. We want to take one of these generalized question answering models and then fine-tune it. We want to teach the model about this very specialized domain of contract reviews. So what we want to do is we want to show this question answering model lots and lots of contracts and provide it with the correct answers so that the model then over time learns where in the contracts these key informations are. And that's exactly where this data set called Contract Understanding Atticus Dataset, or short CUAD, comes in. This dataset was published in March 2021, March this year. And what the team behind this dataset, the team who created this dataset, what they have done is they took more than 500 contracts. They identified 41 common questions that lawyers would always ask of these contracts. Something like, what is the agreement date? What is the name of the contract? Who signed the contract? And so on. Altogether, they reviewed over 9,000 pages and made more than 13,000 annotations. So that means they took these 41 questions on all of those more than 500 contracts and try to answer them by hand. Now, 13,000 annotations is not the same as 500 times 41, and that's because some of these contracts just don't have the answer to that question. So there might be contracts where you don't have a cap on liability within the contract. So so there's no annotation there. Now, if you sum everything up, the work that they put into this, creating this data set, and you take, a back of the envelope calculation with the figures I said earlier about, $500 to $900 per hour of work, the commercial value of this data set is quite impressive. It's 2 million, roughly $2 million US. Just seeing one question in the chat. So yeah, basically, yes, they asked 41 questions for each of those contracts. So every contract got reviewed on the basis of these 41 questions. I'm gonna share the link to the paper as well. So not only did they create a data set, they wrote a really nice paper on how they went about it and their approach. It's a really great paper because it's largely almost entirely non-technical, and even someone like I can basically understand it. Now, with that, I'm gonna stop the presentation. No, that did not work. Just give me 1 second. Stopping the presentation and want the chat open. Right. Before we go into the actual demo, just a few, again, I'm going to share all these links later on the meetup group, but this is the homepage of the Atticus project who created the data set. And this is the paper that they wrote about it. Again, it's a really good read. I highly encourage. And as you can see, it's really non-technical. This is the model zoo. I'm actually looking for the data set. So the data set you can download from the homepage, obviously, but also what you can do is remember the homepage about the startup I mentioned earlier called Hugging Face. They have actually incorporated this dataset, this CUAD dataset, into the website, which makes it even easier for you to download and train models with. That being said, for this demo, I have not trained my own model. I have not fine-tuned my own model on the CUAD dataset, but I chose one of the models that the CUAD team themselves trained. And I took the smallest one because we're going to run the demo on a CPU machine, and it takes a while the bigger the model is, it takes longer to create the answers. So I took the Roberta base model that the team created and basically uploaded it into a Hugging Face space. That is a website it's a section on the Hugging Face website where people can basically upload the machine learning and NLP models so that others can play around with these applications. So what I did is I took the model from the CUAD database and I have created this little app with a framework called Streamlit, which makes it really easy to write these front-end apps. So I'm not a front-end developer at all, but you know, with Streamlit you can just write these interfaces with Python code. And so I want to walk you through a little bit here what's happening in the app. You can pick here on the left-hand side, you can pick one of 3 predefined contracts, or you can upload your own contract in text format here as well. I'm gonna, for the demo, I'm gonna just pick these predefined contracts, but feel free to play around with this and try it out with your own contracts. So first one, this is a contract, a development, web design, development and hosting agreement. And the first contract, the first question that we're going to ask the contract is just, what is the contract name? And if I hit analyze, it's always going to take a few seconds. But what's happening now in the background is the model reads through the contract. It actually has to chunk it up into sizable portions and run through the different chunks of the contract in order to find the relevant answer to this question. Now, in this case, it was quite easy because the answer was at the very top, but it found the contract name, which is website design, development, hosting agreement. And the model even gives you a probability. So how certain is the model that it actually found the right answer? Now, if I pick the second contract and pick maybe a different question, so what is the agreement date of the contract? Again, you can already see that, you know, the answer is at the very top. So we do expect the model to find that. And it found it 1st day of April 2018, but only with a probability of around 70%. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But now I want to maybe find something in the contract that is not right at the top and maybe a bit harder to find for the model. So I'm going to ask the model which state or country's law governs the interpretation of this contract. So this is probably somewhere, you know, further down in the contract, But again, it is actually quite certain that this agreement shall be governed and interpreted in accordance with laws of state of Florida. Now, if I just quickly click in here, there's obviously lots of improvement potential on this demo, because it would be nice if we would see the predicted answer highlighted right away. But if I go in here and just search for Florida, I can find the section. It's somewhere in the middle. And it looks like this is indeed the correct answer. Now, going back to the first contract and asking also the agreement date of the contract for this one, we will see that the model will find the right answer, but with a very low probability, only 47%. And the reason for that is that this date of January 11th, 2018 occurs several times in the contract. So if we actually now select not the top result, but we want to see the top 3 results, we'll see that, at least I think, if I remember correctly, the first 2 results are basically the same. It says Jan 11, 2018 and January 11, 2018, both with a similar probability. The one that says January 2011, 2018 is right up here. And if we scroll all the way down, we can see that here is where the model picked this Jan.11, 2018. Now, this is not ideal, but what you can do if you were to use such a model, you could, after the prediction, you could do some post-processing of the model results. And in such a post-processing step, what you could do is basically compare those two and apply some logic, some regular expressions maybe, to figure out that these are basically the same answers, and then pick them with a higher confidence. I also mentioned that some models just don't have an answer to some of the questions. So if we ask from this contract 1, what is the state or country's law that governs the interpretation, and analyze that, we'll see there is actually no such section, and we want the model for us to tell that. So it says, in this case, the model just didn't find an answer in the document. Maybe one last one, which is question, what is the agreement date? Yeah, that one is interesting because there's an agreement date and right next to it is an effective date. So in this case, it was actually able to pick up the agreement date, but again, not with a high probability. So don't think of these machine learning models, these NLP models, as like, replacing lawyers. You can see clearly here that they are not nearly confident enough in most of these predictions, but it's the analogy when, like, I had a chat with one of my lawyer friends earlier this week, yesterday, and the analogy I always try to make is they would, like, as a lawyer, you also wouldn't do arithmetic in your head anymore. You would use a calculator, and you wouldn't use a typewriter to write a document. You would use a computer. So the idea here is really to have this as a tool that supports and helps lawyers to be a bit more efficient or faster when it comes to contract review. A few more things. The nice thing about Hugging Face Spaces is, again, it's all open source. So if you were to click on files and versions, you can see all the code that I wrote for the application right here, and you can just clone that and play around with it. All the code is also based on a GitHub repo that I wrote earlier this year in April. And I also wrote, if you want to learn a little bit more about the inner workings of these models, I wrote 2 blog posts about contract review and machine learning models. So this first part of the blog post goes a little bit into how do these models make predictions. You can see they try to find the right starting point for an answer and the right ending point, and then calculate a probability based on that. The second part of the blog post of the tutorial goes a little bit into the fact that we have to actually split up the contracts, because a lot of these question answering models, they have a limit of tokens. In this case, the Roberta model has a limit of 512 tokens. So that means roughly the contract cannot be longer than 512 words. And you can see that a lot of the contracts are much longer than that. Right, so I think this is all I wanted to show you guys. If you do have any questions, we can still, I can try to answer your questions as much as I can in the chat, or if you have any follow-up questions, use the Meetup group. There's a section for comments, I believe. I'm happy to also answer any questions there. Or otherwise, just reach out on the Meetup group or on LinkedIn, and just ask away. All right, I'm just checking the chat to see if there's any questions in here. So what do we do if I have questions? One of yes, so. Jay asks, what do we do if we have questions for the contract that are not part of this set of 41 questions? In that case, well, I always encourage people to first just try it out and see what happens. But most likely, more likely than not, the contract will, the model will not be able to properly answer those questions. What you need then to do is, if you have a set of contracts and a set of questions already labeled, you can fine-tune your model further by providing your specific questions. But again, with the caveat that you need a few examples at the very least to train the model. And again, there's no hard and fast rule. It could be 50, could be 200 examples that you need to provide in order to fine-tune the model properly. Again, you have to play around and try it out. May I please quickly use audio? Yes, Ree, please do.
Hey, thank you. This was brilliant. My question is mostly conceptual because I have lesser understanding of NLP. You said that for each contract, 41 questions were asked. And so that means a similar question, like exact same question, has 41 different answers. So,
no, it's a set of 41 questions, 41 very different questions. So if you actually, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
So if I go back to, sorry about that, here where you see the source code for the app that I created, if you go into data folder, you can actually see the 41 questions in the long format and in a short format, but it's very different questions, if that makes sense.
What I was talking about is that each question would have multiple answers in the data set.
Sorry. I think in this data set, they wanted to use questions that are unambiguous. So each question should ideally, I think, again, read through the paper and find out yourself. But I think they constructed it so in such a way that each question only ideally has one answer.
Brilliant. I was just wondering how intelligent the system would have to be to identify the training set, which has different kind of wording and tokens, and then find the similar sort of space in new test set, and then try and identify, yes, that is what is a higher probability answer. But thank you for the links. I would love to go through your tutorials on the blogs that you've written to understand it better.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, be a trivial question. Does the model scan every line of the contract to find the answer to every question? For example, the name of the contract could be found first of 5 pages. So that's from Ash. So Ash, I think, are you asking whether, you know, the model could then stop basically after the first 4 or 5 pages in order to make it quicker, or?
Hi, Heiko. Hi, Heiko.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, my question was like, based on the question, obviously a contract has got certain sections and obviously certain, that's very general. So for example, the name would be found in the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 pages. So that for that question, can the model be responsive to each individual question? So it's just a general kind of thing. Based on the question, the model can sort of work around, or I don't know, I'm just very new to this.
So right now the model is, you know, quite stupid in the sense that no matter what kind of question you ask it, it will always scan the whole model.
Okay.
Sorry, the whole contract, because but you're right, you might want to improve the model in a way that, say, you know, document name, just, you know, train the model. I mean, the model is already trained probably to know that document name. It probably needs to look at the beginning.
Yep.
But for now, it scans everything in the document, because with contracts, you never know where to find the answer.
Absolutely, I understand. Thanks, sir. Thanks, Heiko. Cheers.
So one more question about dataset looking at privacy policies. It's a good question. I do not know the answer. Again, I would refer back to the Hugging Face website. They have an impressive number of datasets here. More than 2,000, and you can even filter by task categories. Other than that, there are many other websites. Kaggle is another example where you could find data sets. So I don't know, maybe is the answer. You probably would have to search around a little bit.
Sorry, Heiko, just last one from me.
Yeah.
How much training time did it take for you to train the whole CUDA data set?
Yes. So again, I was a bit lazy in the sense that I did not train my own model. I used a model that the CUAD team has actually trained themselves and made available for free. That being said, I am currently in the process of setting up a training on the CUAD dataset, just to find out, just to play around a little bit with it myself and to see what kind of parameters we can change to maybe improve the performance of the model. But again, maybe I'm not sure whether they have it in the paper, how long they trained the models for. I would think with such a data set, it's in the realm of, I don't know, I'm throwing out a number, 4 to 6 hours. But also depends obviously on the compute that you're going to use. Sure.
And CUAD dataset, is it freely available?
Yes, the dataset is freely available. It did say somewhere, yeah, here is the license, so CC by 4.0, so that's the Creative Commons. You can copy and redistribute the material in any medium or format, remix, transform, build upon the material for any purpose, even commercially.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Right. I believe I addressed every question in the chat. Apologies if I haven't. Thank you so much for joining. Again, feel free to reach out on Meetup, on LinkedIn. I will post all the resources, the links on Meetup. Yeah, again, thanks for joining. I hope you find it useful. Hopefully I will be able to set up this regularly, this meetup. Like I'm thinking currently once every 2 months, but also if someone else has, you know, ideas on what to present on, please feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to collaborate. Cool. With that, I'm going to end the call. Thanks everyone for joining again, and have a good evening.